Department of Education is going, bye-bye, see you later. This is what Linda McMahon was brought in to do, to dismantle the Department of Education, which was started in 1976 by none other than Jimmy Carter, who, wanted to get bigger and bigger and bigger so you could control what all these kids coming out of school would think. And Donald Trump's saying, no, I want to bring it back to the states. Let's let the states handle it. Let's let the states pay for it. Let's take this one off the federal bureaucracy. And of course, everybody's going nuts. I mean, I've seen some accusations of, this is the Jim Crow era all over again. I'm like, what? And then here's one on CNN. The woman's flipping out because, we're going to lose our DEI. Yeah, you're going to lose it. You better believe you're going to lose it.
It is interesting. You hear always return power back to the states. States have the power. Local governments have the power largely over education and control some 90% of the funding. And the polling on this is actually a majority of Americans oppose gutting the Department of Education. But as you said, it's still very popular with the Republican base.
Yeah, it's extremely popular with the Republican base. If you ever attended a Trump rally, he would go on stage and say this, and the crowd would really go wild. This is something that the MAGA base and some of the far right Republicans have really zeroed in on because of this idea that there is, DEI promoting or racial inequality promoting within the school system, putting one group of people over another, really trying to target that. But already, John, I would say that the administration has already moved to change the culture at schools so much. We know just yesterday that they stripped Pennsylvania University $175 million for them continuing to have a transgender swimmer compete at that school. We know that today Columbia University has to respond to the White House, who has demanded they overhaul their own culture, or else lose $400 million in federal spending. And of course, we've seen over the couple of days that they have really been increasing their targeting of pro-Palestinian protesters who are here on student visas. And so already the culture at these schools, both at higher education and lower education, are continuing to change. But I think this will be the most full-scale scale that they've done. Of course, it's going to be, susceptible to legal challenges. But I think what we've seen over the last few days with USAID and all these kind of other agencies that the administration has moved to shutter, even if a district judge says, listen, you got to bring all these people back, it's been shown that it's difficult to claw these things back and get people back hired when they could be hired in a really unstable environment because you don't know which court is going to say what.
Oh, yeah, we get a feel for those government employees. They're afraid to go and work for the government now because they don't have a guaranteed job for life. Wow. Okay, Columbia, you're going to lose $400 million because you can't keep Jewish students safe on campus. UPenn, you're losing $175 million because for some reason you're really stuck on having naturally born men compete against naturally born females. I can't believe we have to talk about that. Anyway, we've got new tape, just came in moments ago. I actually haven't seen this, you guys. So this is Caroline Levitt actually speaking outside with reporters, talking about the dismantling of the U.S. Education Department, the Department of EDU. Let's listen in and hear what she has to say. Again, I want to caution you in that I have not myself heard this just yet. So we're going to be listening to it together for the first time. They're basically saying that this is going to be a whole lot smaller of a department. And I would just say that, that's good. On the one hand, I will tell you the one caveat. The one thing I worry about is that if you don't have some control over these states financially, I worry that they can really go rogue. And so like in Portland, Oregon, you're going to have challenges. Now, I still think there's going to be some rules. Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate it. I'm going to get your comment in a second. I still think in places like Portland, Oregon, where you have the boy running the 400 meter and setting the record in the girls' sports, you still have some federal constitutional protection. But anyway, we're going to get out of the business of giving these states money to squander. Here we are with Caroline.
Caroline, what do you say to critics of the president's education plan?
Where was their criticism of our nation's failing test scores for the last several decades? The Department of Education was founded in the 1970s, and since then we have spent more than $3 trillion at this federal bureaucracy. What has been the return on that investment for the American taxpayer? Levels that are less than ideal, less than proficient. Our children's test scores are incredibly concerning when it comes to reading rates, literacy rates, math, and science test scores. The numbers prove that, and the president is finally, this president is finally taking much needed action to return education to where it belongs, and that's to educators closest to students in their classrooms in their respective states. We're going to have a great event here later at 4 o'clock. There will be students here, teachers here, parents here, educators, and of course governors from around the country who are very excited about taking on this responsibility to educate our nation's students.
Who's going to run federal student loans?
So the Department of Education will be much smaller than it is today. As you know, the President's executive order directed Linda McMahon to greatly minimize the agency. So when it comes to student loans and Pell Grants, those will still be run out of the Department of Education, but we don't need to be spending more than $3 trillion over the course of a few decades on a department that's clearly failing in its initial intention to educate our students.
So is the federal government going to be
going to
spending
be
less?
much smaller than it is. Is it not going to be shut down completely? And then I have a second question.
As I said, Pell Grants and student loans will still be run out of the department in Washington, D.C., but the great responsibility of educating our nation's students will return to the states.
And the Department of Education plays a critical role in enforcing
So again, she's taking questions.
laws that prohibit discrimination.
It's hard to hear the reporter's questions.
Any critical
again.
functions of the department, such as that, will remain. But again, we're greatly reducing the scale and the size of this
What
department.
about federal Title I funding and special?
So again, Caroline Levitt just coming out and telling everybody about the plans today. They have a big press conference happening later this afternoon with parents and teachers, et cetera. And honestly, like, I consider this a good day because I really don't want federal government managing my kids' education. Do you? I mean, if you can keep it more localized, that's why we like the local towns, local school systems being run by local school boards, because the localities care a little bit more. Now, yeah, I do kind of worry about places like Portland, Oregon. But you know what? Let Portland, Oregon worry about itself. Oh my gosh. Anyway, Brian, I'm laughing at your comment there. Thank you for the generosity. And someone else, I think, sent a sticker earlier on in this session. So, like I said, I always have the best viewers. Why did this deep state get so big? I think that's a real question, right? Like, what is it? Oh, we have some breaking news on tariffs, too, that I want to get to. We'll handle that in just a moment. But why is it that we are looking at such a massive deep state right now? Like, how did this come about? And you know, a lot of people say, well, you can go back to Obama. I mean, it existed certainly before Obama, but what amazes me is that it has just grown and grown and grown and swelled. And I think, yes, since Obama, the deep state did get much bigger. So why did deep state, I'm actually putting this in your lower here. Why did deep state grow so big? There's an answer to this, okay? There's a really fascinating answer to this. And I kind of touched on it yesterday when we were talking about the Kennedy files, but it has a lot to do with Barack Obama's modernization of what's called the Smith-Mundt Act of 2012. That was the modernization. If you go back, the Smith-Mundt Act actually came out in 1945, and 1948. It was designed to help us control the flow of information all over the world. That's what our Voice of America and Radio Free Europe was doing. We were pushing out propaganda because we wanted our side to be heard. And I'm a realist, I get it. You want your side to be heard. And we had such the advantage in this because we were way ahead of any of the other countries, right? When it came to radio, when it came to television, when it came to Hollywood. And so this was an effort that was made in 1948 as they were trying to fight the Cold War to basically say, okay, we're going to create all this propaganda and we're going to send it all over the world. But here's the deal. That propaganda doesn't come home. We send it out, but it doesn't come back in. And we developed, thanks to the Smith-Mundt Act in 1948, a Chinese wall preventing any of that propaganda paid for, courtesy of you, the U.S. taxpayer, paid for by us, that was not allowed to come back. In other words, you couldn't turn it on the American people until Obama. All right, so in 2013, the amendment went through. It's known as the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012. And basically that domestic ban on propaganda that U.S. taxpayers were paying for, think USAID, think NGOs, all this money that was going to all this stuff, guess what? To journalist organizations, it was suddenly allowed to come back on shore. And that, ladies and gentlemen, helps to explain the insanity that we've been seeing over the last however many, 10 years? I mean, it's only been around for like 12 years. Sure enough, Obama, right? Wasn't he the one who talked about the echo chambers? And if you just repeat something over and over and over again, eventually everybody will believe it. Mike Pence, who used to work at the State Department and has just made this his passion in his career to try and ensure that we have real freedom of speech here in the United States of America. He talked about this on Joe Rogan's show. I played a bunch of the sound yesterday as it related to the JFK files. I'm not going to do that today, just a little snippet. I want you to just hear him because I think he's great on this.
What was done then under Obama was the effective repeal of it. It was called the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. But the modernization got rid of the whole purpose of it, the firewall, because at the time the media and media control was seen as the linchpin crux of winning the Cold War, piping in pro-U.S. Media influence because everything moved after World War II from kinetic warfare and military occupation. You know, we used to militarily occupy the Philippines, for example, after we won the Spanish-American War, but that was banned under international law. Territorial acquisition by military force in 1948. So we had to win elections, and we had to influence the passage of laws in foreign countries by having an apparatus inside those countries that influenced the hearts and minds of people, which influenced who they voted for, which then determined the government. So you had to move towards political vassalage rather than military occupation. And what the Smith-Mundt Act did is, simultaneous with the creation of this in 1948, Congress recognized the Frankensteinian monster they were creating by authorizing a covert, permanent Department of Dirty Tricks, and this is their phrase, not mine, to do this cloak and dagger, to infiltrate and co-opt the universities, the unions, the media, the politicians, the judges, the whole swarm army. You know, what I have been calling for a long time the USA Truman Show, because these people in these foreign countries have no idea how many of the things they interact with that are effectively a movie set being constructed by the U.S. State Department and its sister influencers.
I mean, that's freaky. It's just freaky stuff. Anyway, again, Mike's right. So the State Department's out there pulling all these strings, and they got a ton of money to do it because they want to influence opinion and therefore elections all over the world. And we choose, in the name of democracy, exactly who we want to influence and how we want to influence them. And we get a lot of power to do so. But what happens when you turn all of that inward? I mean, the whole idea behind the original Smith-Mundt Act was that you never turned it inward. You never turned it on your people. It was always to be used overseas. And not until Obama did we actually start using it internally. And so now what has come out? Oh, all the USAID money going to the New York Times, going to Politico, going to Reuters, going to the BBC, and all of the domestic issues that they would take on with American politics. This is all part of one and the same. Right? They actually turned it on us as far back as 2013 when it was first enacted by the Department of Defense. And so this is all being done, in the name of preserving democracy, just like we pull overseas. And now we're doing it here at home. So when you ask, how did this deep state get so big? Why is it that there's a chorus that I hear out of Disney, out of Whoopi Goldberg and The View, out of everybody on Morning Joe, out of the New York Times, the Washington Post? Why was it all the same? Well, there was so much money at stake. Okay, I promised only one Mike Pence soundbite. We're going to have to get him on the show. I don't have a ton of guests on the show, but I really am fascinated by this. So let's go back to him very quickly.
We're up against a much, actually, deeper, darker problem with this USAID scandal. And as people will see increasingly, the scandals that will break open at the Pentagon and the State Department. which is that we have a Smith-Mundt problem for funding and operations. It's not just propaganda. The blob, our foreign policy establishment, can fund groups that effectively work with prosecutors domestically, or that work at media. Dual use. We give them foreign grants to do media propaganda abroad, but they operate here. Or social media censorship, to coerce foreign countries to pass foreign censorship laws that explicitly and are intended to attack U.S. social media companies and in U.S. peer-to-peer speech. So we need that protection. If we're going to keep this function at all, we need a hard firewall and absolute grotesque penalties for any violation.
Wow. Okay. And again, not to be too anti-Obama, but think about the reality that he turned this thing on its head. And we don't have the Chinese wall anymore. So all the propaganda that we were selling overseas that was designed to influence elections overseas got turned back on us. And so you ask now, why is there this lawfare? Why do we have these judges doing this, that, and the other? This is why. Or at least a big part of why. And so now they're kind of up a creek without a paddle. I got to tell you guys, I think they have been exposed massively, and they're going to continue to be exposed, and they're on the wrong side of every single issue.